finally would like to invite out Joe Atkinson from PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's got a fascinating study on how children make content decisions. Joe. Hey. Thanks very much.
Hello, everybody. They say the first step in individual growth is self-awareness, and I am completely self-aware that I am between you and lunch. So put your seatbelts on, strap in for a few minutes, and we are going to run through some insights on kids and consumption. So let me give you first the backdrop. PwC does a series that we call the Consumer Intelligence Series. It's an ongoing investment we make in our industry to better understand the trend lines, to better understand the expectations, and better understand the consumption habits of consumers that we're all trying to understand how to connect and reach. And about 6 months or a year ago, we published a piece called The Video Quake. How many people have seen the Video Quake content? Okay, so that's a great to-do for all of you when you leave the room, is take a look at this. For all of us in the room that have been living this in the industry, we know what the Video Quake tells us. Consumption habits are changing. They're changing very, very rapidly. People are consuming content on platforms and in manners that are very different than the way they did before, and that pace of change is accelerating. But there was one demographic that came out of the Video Quake that was interesting to us that we thought warranted a little bit more study, and that was kids. So if you ever tried to unlock the consumption habits of your kids or the behaviors of your kids, that's a whole nother session. That's a 14-day seminar that we're going to hold someplace off-site. But today we're going to talk about just the way they're thinking about activities like what device do I use, the decisions that they're making on what do I want to consume, the decisions that their parents are making for them or the influence that their parents or guardians have on their consumption. And we also want to talk a little bit about how much they're consuming. So let's start there. When we asked parents, guardians, how much consumption their kids were really looking at, they thought it was about 15.7 hours a week. When we asked kids, and we looked at a lot of kids, to give you some background, 511 kids, ages 8 to 11, 12 to 14, 14 to 18. We asked those populations of kids how much they were consuming, and they gave us 15.5 hours. Then we pushed them a little bit and said, why don't you track that? Why don't you see what you're actually consuming? And when they captured it, lo and behold, they were consuming more than they thought or their parents thought. They were consuming more on the order of 16 to 20 hours a week. So what are they consuming? And there were some surprises in this. If you think about kids and consumption and probably a lot of the perceptions that I hold and some of the expectations that I would have as somebody that spends a lot of time in the industry. Number one at the top was drama, as well as, obviously, real series. So reality series and drama was the number one that showed in terms of kids that were consuming that more than 7 hours a week. Number two, as you can see, was games. So when they are engaging in their platforms, they're playing games. Not a big surprise for any of us that have teenagers at home. When you get down beyond that, they were also looking at short content. We've talked a lot about the value of short content and short video, engagement of kids. Kids are looking at short content, they're consuming a ton of it. And then last but not least, when you look at that fourth piece, they were looking at network television and video. So for all of the harbingers on the death of network television for our kids, they're watching it, but not surprisingly, they're not watching it necessarily on the schedule that's coming through network television. Not a great insight there, right? But at the end of the day, they are watching it. They're looking for that content, they're looking for that consumption, and they're pulling it in streaming on all of the platforms that you'd expect. One of the other surprises when we looked at this, while streaming wins, the place that they're looking at it is not the tablet, at least not for the younger generation, that 8 to 11, and to some extent the 12 to 14. It's not the tablet, it's not the mobile phone. The predominant consumption model was actually the television and the laptop and the PC, at least in the kids that we talk to. So we often talk to clients and executives and remind them that the experiences that we all have as people that are generally more immersed in the day-to-day of the industry may not exactly mirror the experience that every kid is having or every consumer is having. And I think there's an important lesson there for that as well. So we know they're consuming it through laptop and PC. Obviously, they're also consuming it on mobile. And the other thing that you see is as they age, mobile consumption climbs. You see mobile consumption climbing, and you see overall consumption climbing. 8 to 11-year-olds were consuming about 3 hours a week less than their counterparts by the time they were 18. So consumption climbs, and it shifts to mobile. But how are they discovering what they want to watch? What does that look like? And this was, I think, another surprise, certainly to me and I think to a lot of our team, that the first and foremost source that they were looking at in terms of how they discovered the content that they were consuming was advertising. So for all the folks in the room that are working with your advertising and marketing teams and wondering whether or not you're having any impact in this demographic, the answer is yes, you're having an impact in this demographic. They are responding to advertising. Perhaps also surprisingly was the second category was not social media referrals, but it was direct referrals from friends and family. It was true word of mouth. I watched this show last night. Did you watch this show last night? The third category was social media. So indirect, if you will, references and discovery on social media. What I would share with you about the social media, and this was about discovery, is we also see data, and we all see the data, right? We also see data that when they engage in content, they engage in social media. That's a simultaneous, multi-platform, multi-nodal kind of experience that the kids through all the age groups are driving. But when it comes to discovery, how they find our content, they find it first through advertising. So I laughed a little bit. I've got 3 kids. I won't do a show of hands on 3 kids. But if you look at these numbers about how parents influence their kids' consumption, only about 52% of the parents would even claim they influence it at all. So you've got to put the numbers on the chart in context of about half of the parents would even claim an influence. And when they said of that group how many decide, only 11% across all the age groups, by the way, including the 8 to 11-year-olds, were saying that parents are deciding content. They talk about it, they discuss it. There was this perception from parents that if I pay for it, I drive it. And so there was this belief that somehow the purse strings controlled consumption. And I think short of controlling the password to the online activities, there really is not control by purse strings. So a lot of delusion in parental circles. As a longtime parent, I understand the delusion, I embrace it, I accept it, and actually am pretty happy with it. So when you look at the implications for content producers and distributors, what does it mean? This is not shocking, but I will tell you that what we talk about in content and production for every other demographic applies just as powerfully for the kids. What did they tell us? They said they want to follow characters that they like. They want to follow characters that they're ready to invest in. They want stories that engage them. They want content that makes sense to them. So there's no magic in the data that we saw that's suggesting that kids are somehow more difficult to reach in the content development than the rest of the demographics. Do they have a different experience set and a different lens that they're applying to it? Absolutely. But their expectations in terms of the value of that content and how they want to engage in it is pretty much the same as every other demographic. Clearly, you've got to do it age appropriate. Otherwise, that parental control number probably comes up a little bit. But at the end of the day, they want engaging stories. They want content that makes sense to them. They want content that brings them into it. So when you look at those implications, what are we suggesting for content producers aside from, hey, great stories and great characters make great content? If we keep doing that, we bring them. The other really interesting learning is you can reach these demographics from an advertising platform perspective. They engage digitally. We know they engage digitally. But the advertising that you're pushing in terms of ad impressions, both on the social platforms and elsewhere, are having an impact in the way that they discover content. And you can influence parents to the degree that parents are looking for, when they do talk about the control that they apply, they're looking for opportunities for kids to see healthy, behavioral, all of the things that those parents that you would expect to be more actively engaged in decisions around content, they're looking for the higher value, higher profile content that it's going to be more about discovery, science, it's going to be more about learning, health, etc. So I promised that that was going to be very, very quick. So let me just talk quickly about the CIS, and then we'll open it up for a question or two in the minute or so that we have. We provide through pwc.com/CIS, and a number of you probably have the detailed reports in front of you today, studies on consumer intelligence on an ongoing basis. They're available to you and all of your teams. So feel free to pull them down. We also have an app. If you pull it down from the App Store called 365, you can pull all of this content. And I share it with you not only because we love you to absorb our content, obviously, but because as more of you engage in that content, we can better refine the topics, the interest areas, the challenges that you're facing so that we can drive that into our consumer intelligence series, which is both survey data as well as focus groups that we conduct with kids, parents, and consumers across the way. So I've got about just under a minute left, and happy to take any questions on that quick run through on the content. That's the sound of stomachs growling, I think, which is, I'm going to just accept that for what it is. So, well, we are really, really very pleased to be here with you at the Wrap and here at the Grill. This is an industry that's very important to us and near and dear to us. So I hope you've enjoyed the content run through that we've had and appreciate you hanging in there through the lunch hour. Thanks very much.